Usually, when we look at a mathematical equation, there is this unspoken expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like engineering.
Exactly, like engineering.
Yeah.
You look at 2 plus 2, the logic holds, the proof is right there on the chalkboard, and the mathematician just points and says, there it is, 4.
Yeah, it is binary.
It's entirely binary. It is locked in place, correct or incorrect. And there is a profound comfort in that, right? Because we rely on those constants to build our entire understanding of physical reality.
I mean, if the math wasn't fixed, the bridges would literally collapse.
The planes would fall out of the sky. But the moment you step out of the physics lab and into the world of ancient texts, of translation, of spiritual history, suddenly that calculator just completely shatters.
Oh, it is a totally different world.
We find ourselves looking at this linguistic and historical landscape that is just incredibly reeky. It is a space where people have somehow, over centuries, become comfortable with total ambiguity.
Yeah.
The hard math of language suddenly turns into, abstract finger painting.
Which is a terrifying shift, honestly, when you think about what is actually at stake here.
Right.
We are talking about the foundational texts that billions of people use to orient their entire existence. Yet the analytical rigor we apply to building, say, a simple suspension bridge is somehow completely abandoned when we try to interpret the architecture of these texts.
It is wild.
We just accept contradictions. We accept that words can morph and change based on the mood of the translator or the historical convenience of the era.
Well, today we are going into a text that sets out to fix that broken calculator. We are jumping into a deep dive on a dense, incredibly challenging, but ultimately paradigm-shifting framework developed by Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Yes.
And just to be absolutely clear from the jump here, everything we are unpacking today, the linguistic rules, the psychological models, the entire reevaluation of historical truth, it is entirely the architecture of Dr. Khaled Waleed.
100%. We are just walking through the blueprint he has drafted.
Right. And the specific mystery that Dr. Waleed uses to, kick open the door to this entire framework revolves around a figure known to half the planet, the prophet Abraham.
Yeah, the central question Dr. Waleed isolates here is so provocative. He asks, did the prophet Abraham suffer from flawed faith?
Wow.
Right. When he asked the divine how the dead are resurrected, was he harboring bad thoughts?
Was he having a crisis of belief?
Exactly, like a moment of deep existential doubt where his certainty in the divine actually cracked.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to play devil's advocate for a second. If you look at a lot of traditional commentaries, what are often broadly categorized as Israelite narratives, they almost universally paint these monumental figures, these prophets, as having moments of sheer human weakness.
Oh, absolutely.
The commentary usually goes something like, look, Abraham was human. Even the greatest prophets doubted God sometimes. They got confused. They got overwhelmed.
Right. It is framed as a comfort to the modern reader.
Exactly. The logic is, if Abraham doubted, well, then it is okay if you doubt.
And that is exactly the narrative Dr. Khaled Waleed targets. And he argues that it is not just slightly incorrect. He argues it is the exact opposite of the truth.
The exact opposite.
According to Dr. Waleed, this is a fundamental, almost catastrophic misreading of the text and of the psychology of a prophet.
So he just completely rejects the weeping doubter narrative.
Completely. He introduces a concept he calls linguistic physics to prove that Abraham wasn't doubting at all. Zero deficit in his faith.
Zero.
Instead, Dr. Waleed argues Abraham was engaging in high-level, rigorous scientific verification.
That is a massive pivot.
It changes everything.
We are moving from a narrative of spiritual fragility to one of empirical rigor. And, if you have ever been in a classroom or a boardroom and you felt hesitant to ask how a process works because you were terrified it would make you look like a skeptic, this framework from Dr. Waleed is going to completely rewire how you view questioning.
It really validates the intellect.
It does. But to understand Abraham's mindset and why Dr. Waleed defends his status so fiercely, we cannot just look at the story. We have to look at the atoms that make up the story.
Right, the language itself.
We have to start with the architecture of words.
Specifically, we have to completely redefine a deeply misunderstood concept that Dr. Waleed isolates as the foundation of this entire misunderstanding. And that is the Arabic word zan.
Okay, zan. Now, if you pick up a standard translation of these ancient texts, zan is almost always translated as guessing or assumption.
Yeah, or like suspicion.
Right. It is treated like a hunch. Like, I have a zan that it might rain today, or I have a zan that the stock market will drop. It feels flimsy.
It is treated as a shot in the dark, entirely devoid of certainty. But Dr. Waleed vigorously corrects this. He strips away centuries of loose colloquial usage and applies a brutally rigorous definition.
So what is his definition?
According to Dr. Khaled Waleed, Zan is a scientific psychological expectation.
A scientific psychological expectation.
Yes, it is not a guess. It is the cumulative result of knowledge that has real-world consequences. And the cornerstone of Dr. Waleed's system is that this word has a fixed, unchangeable meaning.
Meaning it cannot mean guess on one page and certainty on another page.
Exactly. It is fixed.
Let's break that phrase down, though. Scientific psychological expectation. Because that carries an immense amount of weight.
It really does.
If it is scientific, it means there is a methodology behind it. If it is psychological, it means it is an active state of mind, like an algorithm running in the brain.
Right, it is structural.
It implies that Zan is not something that just happens to you. It is something you build based on data points.
And that is the critical distinction Dr. Waleed makes. You are accumulating premises, you are observing reality, and you are formulating an expectation that dictates your behavior.
Okay.
And Dr. Waleed breaks down how this psychological expectation operates in two distinct, opposed directions based on the quality of the data you feed into it.
The inputs.
Right. He categorizes these as bad Zan and good Zan, using specific textual evidence to show how these aren't just passing feelings. They're existential states that determine your ultimate reality.
Let's look at the bad Zan first, because the stakes Dr. Waleed outlines here are incredibly high.
They are life and death.
The source text he uses states, "Your bad expectation of your Lord has ruined you, so you became among the losers."
Yeah.
That word ruined is intense. I mean, it doesn't mean you just had a bad day. It implies total structural collapse.
Dr. Waleed explains this bad Zan as a deeply rooted negative psychological programming. Think about the mechanics of it.
Okay.
If your foundational expectation, your cumulative psychological state, is built on a faulty or deeply negative premise about the ultimate reality, it directly leads to your destruction.
Because all your actions flow from that premise.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed is pointing out that it is not that the divine arbitrarily punishes you for a bad guess. It is that the psychological algorithm you are running is fundamentally corrupted.
Yep.
Therefore, every single action you take, every decision you make based on that expectation, actively leads you closer to ruin. You have quite literally programmed yourself for failure because your baseline coordinate is wrong.
So it is like putting the wrong coordinates into a highly advanced GPS system.
That is a great way to look at it.
You blindly follow the turn-by-turn directions, and then you are shocked when you drive your car off a cliff. The GPS didn't hate you. The satellite didn't punish you.
No.
Your initial expectation, your programmed input, was disastrously wrong from the start, so the entire journey was doomed.
That analogy maps perfectly onto Dr. Waleed's framework. The destruction is the natural physical consequence of the bad Zan.
So what about the flip side?
Well, Dr. Waleed presents the concept of good Zan. He pulls another quote from the text. He quotes, "I expected or knew that I would meet my account."
And what is the result of that specific expectation?
The text says, "He is in a pleasing life."
So the outcome is structural success.
Yes. Dr. Waleed defines this good Zan as a certain expectation built on solid knowledge.
Certain expectation.
Right. Notice the difference there. This person didn't just casually cross their fingers and guess they would be held accountable.
They weren't just hoping.
They accumulated knowledge, they processed reality, and they developed a scientific, psychological expectation of accountability. Because they had that solid premise, they built a pleasing, successful life around it.
The Zan acted as a load-bearing foundation for their reality.
Precisely.
I want to push on this a little bit just to see if the framework holds up in everyday terms.
Yeah.
Let's try an analogy.
Sure.
Think about a commercial airline pilot. When a pilot flies a massive jet through a thick storm cloud with absolute zero visibility, they are entirely reliant on their instruments.
Right, they can't see a thing outside.
The altimeter, the gyroscope, the artificial horizon. Now, the pilot has good Zan that the plane is flying level and won't crash into a mountain, but that Zan isn't a whimsical guess.
Not at all. Because if it were just a guess, the anxiety would be paralyzing.
Right. You would be terrified. Their good Zan is a fixed psychological certainty. And how did they get it?
Through data.
It has been built on thousands of hours of training, a deep understanding of the physics of aerodynamics, and trust in the engineering of those instruments.
They have an expectation based on accumulated scientific premises.
Exactly. Even though they cannot physically see the ground, their psychological expectation, their zan, is absolute.
And that is the exact mechanism Dr. Khaled Waleed is isolating. The pilot's zan is a fixed psychological state derived from empirical knowledge.
So he takes this and applies it to Abraham.
Yes. Dr. Waleed takes this strict scientific definition of zan and applies it to the prophet Abraham. And the moment he does, the entire historical narrative we have been taught shifts dramatically.
Because if we apply this definition, Abraham wasn't guessing about the divine.
No.
He wasn't having a moment of weakness.
Dr. Waleed asserts that Abraham had absolute, unshakable good zan. He already possessed total psychological knowledge that the divine was fully capable of resurrecting the dead.
So there was zero deficit in his belief.
Zero. He wasn't sitting there thinking, I wonder if God is powerful enough to do this. His question wasn't about the capacity of the divine.
It was an inquiry into the mechanics. He was asking about the method.
Yes. And understanding that distinction changes everything about how we read the text.
But hold on. If we accept Dr. Waleed's premise, if his zan was perfectly intact, if he was already psychologically certain that the resurrection was a reality, why did he open his mouth and ask how the dead are resurrected at all?
That is the big question.
Why not just sit back in perfect certainty? Because this is where traditional commentators get stuck, right? Because asking how implies you don't know something, and not knowing feels uncomfortably close to doubting.
Which brings us to the second massive linguistic pillar in Dr. Khaled Waleed's framework. If he has redefined zan, he now has to completely redefine another word that has been historically mangled to fit these narratives of weakness.
And what word is that?
That word is shak.
Shak. Again, standard translation usually throws this word into English as doubt.
Right. And not just mild hesitation, but the kind of faith-shaking doubt that keeps you up at night, questioning your entire reality. The kind of doubt that implies a fracture in your belief system.
A translation which Dr. Waleed entirely and aggressively rejects, especially when applied to the station of prophethood.
So what is it then?
In Dr. Waleed's architectural framework, shak is not doubting existence. It is not an existential crisis. Dr. Waleed defines shak as cognitive spiritual processing.
Cognitive spiritual processing. That is fundamentally different from doubt.
It is entirely different.
Doubt is passive. It is something that happens to you, a creeping anxiety. Processing sounds incredibly active.
It is.
It sounds like a computer's CPU crunching complex data to render an image.
It is highly active. According to Dr. Waleed, it is the brain and the spirit requesting a match between internal theory and external reality.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look closely at the specific interaction from the text that Dr. Waleed uses to build this case. Abraham asks, "How do you give life to the dead?"
The divine responds with the question, "Have you not believed?" And Abraham replies, "Yes, but to reassure my heart."
To reassure my heart. That specific phrase is beautiful, but it is exactly where people get tripped up.
Because of the word reassure.
Right. The traditional assumption is that reassurance implies he was in a state of panic or anxiety. If you need reassuring, you must be scared. Right.
That is the assumption Dr. Waleed dismantles. He dives deep into the concept of this reassurance. The Arabic term is al-itminan.
Al-itminan.
Yes. According to Dr. Waleed, Abraham wasn't anxious. He already had a highly developed mental imagination of how resurrection might work.
So he had a theory.
He had formulated a hypothesis based on his perfect zan. His shak, his cognitive processing, was simply a request to match his internal mental image with practical external reality.
So his heart wasn't fluttering with panic.
Not at all.
It was simply waiting for the final piece of an empirical puzzle to click into place so the picture could be perfectly still.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed unpacks a profound philosophical transition here. He identifies that Abraham is moving from what is historically called the knowledge of certainty, ilm al-yaqin.
Ilm al-yaqin.
Right, to the eye of certainty, ayn al-yaqin.
The knowledge to the eye.
Now, we have to really understand the difference between these two states to grasp Dr. Waleed's point. Ilm al-yaqin, the knowledge of certainty, is the theoretical understanding. Abraham already possessed this. His zan was perfect.
He had the knowledge.
But the highly developed human mind, especially the prophetic mind, desires the ultimate culmination of knowledge, which is ayn al-yaqin, witnessing it practically.
Let me try to contextualize this transition from the knowledge of certainty to the eye of certainty, because it is such a crucial part of Dr. Waleed's thesis.
Go for it.
Think about a theoretical physicist, someone sitting at a chalkboard doing math that is so complex it looks like alien hieroglyphs to the rest of us. Through this math, they prove that a specific subatomic particle absolutely must exist for the universe to function. They have the knowledge of certainty. The math is flawless. Their Zan is perfect.
Yes, the theoretical foundation is mathematically unshakable.
But then what do? They do not just publish the paper, wipe their hands, and retire.
They want to test it.
They spend 20 years and $10 billion building a massive super collider in Switzerland. They build a machine the size of a small city, entirely dedicated to smashing protons together so they can actually see the particles.
Exactly.
Now, the scientist doesn't doubt their math. They aren't building the collider because they wake up in a cold sweat thinking their equations are a lie.
Of course not.
They build it because they want the visual, practical proof to, as Dr. Waleed puts it, still their mental image. They want to see it with their own eyes. They want the eye of certainty.
That is a phenomenal way to illustrate Dr. Waleed's thesis. Dr. Waleed explicitly describes Abraham's request as a need to know if his imagined method was correct, or if it needed adjustment via practical evidence.
So he asked for the super collider.
He asked for the visual proof of his mathematical certainty. And the text provides it in the form of a highly specific experiment, the famous narrative of the 4 birds.
Right. God doesn't say, how dare you ask, just believe harder. There is no reprimand for the question.
Not at all.
Instead, the divine gives him a methodology. Take 4 birds. It is a procedural demonstration.
It is a literal laboratory experiment provided by the divine.
Step by step.
He is instructed to train them, to cut them up, place parts of them on different hills, and call them back, witnessing their reconstitution and return.
Unbelievable.
Dr. Waleed uses this sequence to completely validate his definition of Shak as cognitive processing. Abraham was adjusting his mental model based on the practical experiment provided by the divine.
So it wasn't a crisis of faith.
It was the scientific method applied to the miraculous.
This reframing completely blows the roof off how we view historical failures of faith. I mean, by taking these questions and categorizing them as scientific verification rather than a crisis of faith, Dr. Khaled Waleed is completely elevating Abraham's historical and spiritual status.
Absolutely.
He is actively rescuing him from the dusty, depressing pages of tragic human doubt and placing him at the absolute pinnacle of empirical inquiry.
And this brings us to a major critical point in Dr. Waleed's broader project. He uses this granular linguistic analysis to actively liberate the prophets from what he terms traditional Israelite narratives.
Let's expand on that term for a moment. When Dr. Waleed talks about Israelite narratives in this context, he is talking about a specific genre of historical commentary and folklore that seeped into textual interpretation over centuries.
Correct. These are the accumulated layers of exegesis, storytelling, and embellishment that often try to humanize the prophets by depicting them in states of profound weakness, bewilderment, or existential dread.
To make them relatable.
Yes. It is a very specific psychological phenomenon among commentators. There is this narrative trap that assumes that to make a prophet relatable to the common person, you have to make them deeply flawed in their primary function, which is their faith.
It is the idea of, look, Abraham doubted just like you do when you get a scary medical diagnosis or when you can't pay your rent.
Right, which is just...
It is a false equivalence. It is designed to make us feel better about our own lack of certainty. We drag them down so we don't feel so low.
And Dr. Waleed views this as fundamentally degrading to their station. It corrupts the text to serve human insecurity.
Right.
By redefining Zan as scientific expectation and Shak as cognitive processing, Dr. Waleed systematically strips away these layers of folklore. He highlights a magnificent new title for Abraham based on this textual rigor.
What is the title?
He calls him the engineer of the covenant.
The engineer of the covenant. Wow. That is such a striking departure from the weeping doubter.
It changes his entire posture.
It implies structure. It implies mathematics, load-bearing architecture, testing, and absolute precision.
An engineer doesn't deal in blind guesses or emotional crises when they are building a bridge.
No.
An engineer deals in material realities, tensile strength, and structural integrity. Dr. Waleed argues that Abraham wasn't deficient in faith. He was acting precisely as an engineer, establishing a practical vision of divine sovereignty over matter.
A practical vision.
He was testing the structural integrity of reality itself by observing the mechanics of life and death. He needed the blueprint, the knowledge, to match the physical stress test, the witnessing.
Because an engineer needs to know how the bridge holds the weight, not just the abstract fact that it does. The blueprint is the knowledge of certainty.
Right.
Driving the heavily loaded truck over the bridge to watch it hold, that is the eye of certainty.
And Dr. Waleed connects this need for reassurance, this intense cognitive processing, directly to Abraham's later immense trials. We have to look at the timeline of Abraham's life to see why this verification was necessary.
Okay, laid out.
Because Abraham saw the how. Because he was given the practical evidence of the birds and didn't just settle for the theoretical news of resurrection, he was fundamentally empowered for what came next.
Because the source text makes an incredible assertion here, right?
It does.
It says that this practical verification, this shift to the eye of certainty, is exactly what allowed Abraham to face the outstretched hands of the disbelievers with a firm heart.
Yes. When he later faces absolute tyranny, when he is literally facing the fire, his heart doesn't waver.
Why? Traditional narratives might just say, well, God gave him courage.
But Dr. Waleed points to the mechanics. Abraham had courage because he had already done the math.
He'd already run the experiment.
He had witnessed divine sovereignty over matter with the birds. The fire didn't terrify him because he had empirical reassurance of how the universe's mechanics are completely subservient to the divine.
So the fire is just another mechanism.
Exactly. He knew that the fire only burned because the divine allowed it to burn, just as the dead birds only came back to life because the divine willed it.
I think this is a profound moment to pause and reflect on how this applies outside the text, just for you listening. Think about how we operate daily.
It is very revealing.
How often do we accept things purely as news without ever seeking the practical how? We consume so much information, headlines, statistics, corporate strategies, life advice, and we just file it away as fact without ever processing the mechanics behind it.
We just absorb it.
We never ask for the eye of certainty on the information we build our lives around. Dr. Waleed is showing us here that true, unshakable strength, the kind of strength that lets you face down massive adversity or profound challenges, it doesn't come from blind, passive acceptance.
No, it doesn't.
It comes from the rigorous pursuit of verifying the mechanics of truth.
That is the very essence of being an engineer of the covenant. It is the relentless demand for practical vision.
But, this profound realization naturally forces us to confront a very disturbing question, one that Dr. Khaled Waleed tackles head on.
Oh, definitely.
Right, because if we are sitting here realizing that Abraham's actions were so clearly an exercise in high-level cognitive processing, and if the words Zan and Shak have these precise, unyielding scientific meanings...
How do we get here?
Exactly. How in the world did we get it so wrong for so long? How did an engineer get remembered as a doubter?
How did the vocabulary of empirical faith become the vocabulary of skepticism? This brings us to Dr. Khaled Waleed's fierce, forensic critique of linguistic distortion.
Okay, this is where it gets really intense.
He isn't just correcting a mistake here. He is exposing a systemic flaw in historical translation. He introduces a concept that is, frankly, terrifying in its implications for anyone who relies on translated text.
What is the concept?
He warns against what he calls the knowledge of opposites, ilm al-idad, or what he more bluntly refers to as linguistic magic.
Linguistic magic. I mean, it sounds like a spell from a fantasy novel, but the way Dr. Waleed describes it, it is a very real, very dangerous historical phenomenon. What exactly is the knowledge of opposites?
It is the pervasive, deeply entrenched myth within traditional linguistics that a single word in the Quran or in any foundational text can mean a specific thing, and simultaneously mean its exact polar opposite, entirely depending on how the commentator feels it should fit the narrative of the sentence.
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I am understanding this correctly.
Yeah.
Are you saying traditional linguists have argued that a single word can mean hot and also mean cold? That a word can mean up, but also sometimes mean down?
Precisely. And Dr. Waleed calls this an absolute myth and a deliberate, dangerous tool of distortion. It is an assault on reason itself.
That is wild. It sounds like linguistic anarchy. How does Dr. Waleed prove this is happening? What are the specific examples he uses to expose this magic?
He points directly back to the words we just defined. He shows how these distorters claim that our word Zan can mean absolute certainty in one verse and then turn around and claim the exact same word means fluctuating, baseless doubt in another verse, just because it fits their interpretation of the story better.
which completely destroys the psychological algorithm we just spent 20 minutes talking about.
It shatters it entirely.
If Zan is a fixed scientific expectation, it cannot suddenly become a random, terrified guess just because the paragraph changed.
Yeah.
That violates the fundamental laws of logic.
Exactly. And Dr. Waleed gives another shocking example with the Arabic word core.
Okay.
He notes that traditional linguists have sometimes claimed this single word can mean both purity and menstruation simultaneously.
Wow.
Two completely opposed physical and ritual states contained within the exact same phonetic word.
That is cognitive dissonance weaponized.
It really is.
How can any society build a theological, legal, or moral framework if the foundational bricks change shape depending on who is holding them?
They can't.
If I hand you a brick and tell you it is made of stone, and tomorrow I hand you the exact same brick and tell you it is made of water, you can't build a house.
You cannot build anything, let alone an unshakable faith. And that is Dr. Waleed's exact point. He counters this madness with a strict, unbreakable rule derived directly from the text itself.
Which is?
He says there is no altering his words. Every single word, according to Dr. Waleed, has what he calls fixed coordinates, idathia thabita.
Fixed coordinates. I love that terminology. It grounds language back in the realm of physics and mathematics.
It means that if Zan means expectation based on premises in context A, its coordinate is locked in the linguistic universe. It cannot suddenly morph into baseless doubt in context B.
It is locked.
Its mass, its trajectory, its fundamental molecular meaning remains fixed across the entire textual universe, regardless of the context.
The implications of this are staggering. I am trying to picture the real-world consequences of this magic of opposites. It is like, imagine you are the captain of ship and you hire a map maker to chart a dangerous, uncharted ocean.
Okay.
You need to know where the reefs are, where the safe harbors are. But this map maker is corrupt, or maybe just lazy, or heavily influenced by folklore.
Right.
And they decide that the symbol for north can sometimes mean north, but sometimes it means south, depending on the prevailing winds or how the map maker was feeling that day.
It destroys navigation entirely. A map where the symbols are fluid isn't a map. It is a hazard.
Exactly. If you try to sail using a map where the foundational symbols can mean their own opposites, you will inevitably crash your ship into the rocks. The map maker hasn't just made a slight clerical error. They have actively destroyed the very concept of direction.
And this is where Dr. Khaled Waleed gets incredibly passionate, and rightly so, because those who push this linguistic magic, those who accept and teach that words can mean their opposites, they are actively trying to make the straight path crooked.
They are bending it on purpose.
They are diluting the truth. Why?
Yeah.
Dr. Waleed argues it is so they can bend the text to follow their own desires, their own historical biases, or simply to excuse their own lack of intellectual rigor.
It is the ultimate shortcut.
If a verse contradicts their cultural folklore, they just claim the word means its opposite to make it fit.
If the text can mean whatever you want it to mean, including its literal opposite, then the text means nothing. It has no authority. You, the commentator, become the god of the text. You are dictating reality rather than discovering it.
It is a form of profound intellectual and spiritual arrogance disguised as linguistic nuance. Dr. Waleed sees this as a fundamental betrayal of the intellect.
Yeah.
It takes the precise, flawless engineering blueprint of the divine and turns it into a subjective ink blot test, where commentators project their own insecurities and cultural baggage onto the prophets.
So how does Dr. Khaled Waleed fight back? Because he doesn't just point out the problem and leave us with a broken map, right?
No, not at all.
He builds a methodology to fix it. He proposes a rigid scientific approach to language that locks meaning in place forever, creating a defense against this magic.
This is his ultimate paradigm,
Yeah.
the synthesis of everything we have discussed today. He calls it linguistic physics.
Linguistic physics. We need to define this meticulously. We know what regular physics is: gravity, thermodynamics, the laws of motion, things that are observable, repeatable, predictable, and universally applicable regardless of the observer.
What is linguistic physics in Dr. Waleed's framework?
It is the application of those exact same absolute, inviolable laws to vocabulary and grammar.
Okay.
Dr. Waleed synthesizes a triangle of this physics based on the journey he takes us on. First, Zan is always immutably a scientific expectation. Second, Shak is always immutably cognitive processing. And third, all words are absolutely fixed.
They have mass.
Exactly. They have mass. They have unalterable coordinates. They operate according to laws that cannot be suspended for the sake of a narrative.
So, under this strict paradigm of linguistic physics, how does Dr. Waleed view the prophets generally? because we have already moved Abraham from a weeping doubter to an engineer. Does this apply to all of them?
Absolutely. Dr. Waleed views the prophets as masters of knowledge. They are the ultimate physicists operating within this strict linguistic and spiritual reality. So when they ask questions...
When they ask questions of the divine, they aren't stumbling in the dark or having emotional breakdowns. They are engaging in highly calibrated scientific verification. They are pulling the levers of reality to observe the mechanics.
They are operating the supercollider.
They're operating the supercollider.
In this paradigm, this linguistic physics, Dr. Waleed says it acts as an impenetrable dam.
Yes, an impenetrable dam against the absolute flood of conflicting, illogical, traditional interpretations.
Right.
Think about the sheer volume of commentary written over centuries that relies entirely on the magic of opposites to make any sense at all. Dr. Waleed's linguistic physics acts as a massive wall that blocks all of that distortion.
It destroys the magic.
It destroys the magic. It forces the reader and the scholar to treat the text with the exactitude of a mathematical formula. You cannot just guess your way through it anymore.
But Dr. Waleed doesn't just theorize this, right? He proves the methodology.
He does.
The source text mentions a highly specific linguistic audit he performs to prove and expose this distortion. There's a reference to a specific word, vasinu. Now, how does a forensic audit of a single word like vasinu actually work in Dr. Waleed's system? How does he prove linguistic physics is real?
This is where Dr. Waleed's rigor truly shines. He doesn't just speak in generalities about language being fixed. He performs these forensic, word-by-word audits.
Okay, take me through it.
The methodology is fascinating. Take an isolated word like vasinu. Traditional commentators might look at a complex verse containing this word, struggle to make it fit their preconceived narrative, and apply the magic of opposites to bend its meaning.
To make it work for them.
Right. Dr. Waleed stops that immediately. His audit involved taking that single word, isolating it like a variable in a mathematical equation, tracing its absolute root coordinate, and then testing that fixed coordinate across every single instance it appears in the text.
So it is a stress test. He is taking the word into a linguistic vacuum chamber.
Precisely. He proves that if you apply the strict laws of linguistic physics, if you refuse to let the word bend, the supposed contradictions in the text completely disappear.
The grammar holds.
The logic holds. The original pure meaning is restored, and the traditional folklore that required the word to bend is exposed as a fabrication.
Wow.
By isolating a single variable like vasinu and proving its fixed coordinate, he demonstrates that the entire formula of linguistic physics works flawlessly.
It is detective work at the atomic level of language. He is proving that the text is structurally sound, and it is only the human commentary that has been flawed.
And if we step back and look at the broader implications of this, Dr. Khaled Waleed isn't just defending the prophet Abraham here. Abraham is the ultimate case study, but the actual project is much, much larger.
What is the larger project?
Dr. Waleed is establishing a universal epistemological charter.
An epistemological charter, meaning a fundamental constitution for how we can possibly know anything to be true.
Exactly. He is saying that words mean what they mean, and protecting that fixed meaning is the frontline defense of reality itself.
Because if we let it slip,
if we allow words to become fluid, if we allow them to harbor their opposites, we lose our grip on objective truth. We drift into a space where power dictates meaning.
Whoever writes the dictionary controls reality.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed's linguistic physics isn't just a linguistic theory. It is a vital rescue mission for objective reality in the face of centuries of linguistic distortion and intellectual compromise.
Which is absolutely profound. Let's take a breath and recap the massive journey we have just been on today, because Dr. Khaled Waleed has given us an incredible amount to process.
It is a lot to take in.
We started by looking at a historical text that seemed to show a great prophet struggling with human doubt. But using Dr. Waleed's groundbreaking framework, we completely rescued the prophet Abraham from those damaging reductionist narratives.
We fundamentally redefined his questions not as spiritual weakness, but as a high-level cognitive processing. Shack, which was fueled by an already perfectly intact scientific psychological certainty.
Exactly.
Zan.
He wasn't a skeptic. He was the engineer of the covenant, demanding the eye of certainty to match his perfect knowledge of certainty. He wanted to see the math proved in the physical world.
And to understand how humanity ever got confused about this, we had to confront the magic of opposites, that corrupt map-making that allows words to mean whatever a commentator wants them to mean.
And we countered that magic with Dr. Waleed's ultimate weapon, linguistic physics. The impenetrable dam of fixed coordinates that protects the reality of language, demanding that we treat words with the respect of empirical constants.
It is a stunning, paradigm-shifting way to read text, understand history, and view the psychology of certainty.
All of this is thanks to the incredibly rigorous, uncompromising work of Dr. Khaled Waleed.
And before we conclude, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question based directly on Dr. Waleed's thesis.
Let's hear it.
We have just seen how misunderstanding the fixed coordinates of words can completely warp our view of history, of faith, and of the profound minds of the prophets. It literally changed an engineer into a doubter in the minds of millions.
Yeah.
If the magic of opposites has successfully distorted foundational concepts like doubt and certainty for so long in our ancient texts, look at your own life. Look at the media you consume, the corporate jargon you hear, the political rhetoric that surrounds you daily.
Oh, that is a great point.
What other fundamental words in your life are you accepting as fluid? What definitions are you allowing others to warp into their opposites when they should actually be treated as fixed physics?
If the calculator is broken, how many of your daily equations are just giving you the wrong answers? And who benefits from that broken math? That is something to truly chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep checking your coordinates.